Welcome into the GoVols247 Podcast. I'm Ben McKee, and I am joined by Patrick Brown on this Thursday, February 5th edition of the GoVols247 Podcast. We have to talk Joey Aguilar and Tennessee's quarterback situation, as if that has not already been a hot enough topic over the last several months, as if it has not been discussed enough over the last couple of months. There's more to discuss since the last time we spoke here on the podcast, and we're going to dive into all things Joey Aguilar and Tennessee's quarterback room here in the first segment. And then the legendary John Wilkerson joined me in the second segment to share his thoughts on Joey Aguilar and what his potential return could mean for Tennessee's ceiling this upcoming season. And then I got John on because I wanted to talk basketball. So we mostly talked basketball, but also got John's thoughts on Joey Aguilar. And of course, if I'm going to have the GOAT of Tennessee baseball on, the voice of Tennessee baseball on, I've got to ask him about Tennessee baseball. So we talked Josh Elander and the Diamond Vols on the way out the door. And I will plug, before I ask Patrick how he's doing, there's also a Diamond Vols podcast posted to the feed today in addition to this podcast. So if you would like more Tennessee baseball talk, Christian Scott and Jay Abernathy days away from first pitch, that is in your feed if you would like to check that out as well. Patrick, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. I am just pleased to be on the same podcast as two upstanding individuals like yourself and John Wilkerson, not to mention capital P professionals. I am dragging the podcast down with my presence. Let's put it that
way. That is not true whatsoever, because you're the football guy and I'm the baseball guy. Okay, don't forget that. I'm just glad I could keep.
Which one's won a national championship lately, Ben?
That is true. That is true. But you contributed because you had to fill in for me during the basketball baseball crossover season that seems to go on forever in the month of February and March, and you're going to help me out again this year, which I greatly appreciate. I'm just glad we could keep Ryan Callahan off another podcast, because
agreed.
If he knew, and I hope that he doesn't find out that we talked Tennessee basketball or Tennessee baseball, because he might take it to the higher ups and might try to punish me for it. I'm kidding. Ryan appreciates the basketball and baseball team as well. I just like to give Ryan a hard time about it. But glad to see you. Glad you're doing well. We're both kind of bummed out right now because our Memphis Grizzlies have traded our beloved Jaren Jackson Jr. We don't know what's going to happen with Ja Morant. The Grizzlies organization is just, it's so disgusting right now. But we're not going to talk anymore about it because we're already depressed and bummed enough about it. At least we've got the Daytona 500 for us next Sunday. In the meantime, Joey Aguilar.
And the Super Bowl, yeah.
Oh, yeah, the Super Bowl, too. That's this Sunday. Our Super Bowl is the Daytona 500. I'm kidding. I am excited about the Super Bowl on Sunday. I just don't have I don't know. It just feels like there's no great storyline, I guess, this year, other than the fact that it is the Super Bowl. I mean, all I've heard talked about is Bad Bunny and 2 halftime shows that people can watch. That's the most that I've heard about it, and there's no real connection. I don't know. Great storyline. I don't know. Do you feel that way about this year's Super Bowl?
It's because the Patriots are in it. I was talking to somebody on Wednesday, and they were like, "What do you think?" And I'm like, "I'm just conditioned that the Patriots are going to win because it's what they do. That's just been mine. Every time they get in, they find a way. Whether they're down 28-3, whether they, the Seahawks decide not to hand the ball to Marshawn Lynch from the 1-yard line, whatever it is. It just seems like the Patriots always. I'm just conditioned to expect them to win. I don't think they will. I think the Seahawks are a better team, but
yeah, I guess the local storyline is Mike Vrabel, of course, and
Josh Dobbs.
And Josh Dobbs from a Vols perspective, but I know there's a bunch of Titans fans that are just equally depressed as we are about our Grizzlies, because Amy Adams Strunk just, for some reason, thought that she needed to fire Mike Vrabel, who's one of the best coaches in the NFL, and now he's coaching in the Super Bowl a couple of years later. So I know that's a depressing storyline in this state, but yes, it will be very. I grew up rooting for Peyton Manning when he was a Colt and also a Bronco, but mostly a Colt, and the Patriots were the enemy, on top of all the different scandals that the the Patriots had under Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. So it feels kind of weird, I guess, but it would be cool to see Josh Dobbs get a ring. That would be really, really cool, even if it is with the Patriots.
Yeah, and I believe they are his 9th team. So, but hey, he might have to play. He's the backup quarterback. So, Drake May wakes up with food poisoning or turns his ankle, be Josh Dobbs show. So,
would I be a bad person for rooting for a Drake May injury so Josh
yes,
Dobbs can fly in with his Superman cape and lead the Patriots to the Super Bowl?
yes.
But I'm not wishing like a torn ACL or anything. It's just can we have a minor injury that's harmful enough to where he can't play the remainder of the game?
Does he have migraines by chance? Like, can we
Well,
send some
I don't know
bad
that
room
that's a good
service the night
excuse.
before or something?
Remember the Broncos running back? What is it? Terrell Davis, who dealt with migraines and I believe played in the Super Bowl with a migraine. So I don't know that we can pull that one off. But I'm going to admit it. I'm rooting for Drake May to get hurt so Josh Dobbs can come in and lead the Patriots to the Super Bowl. That's my story. I'm sticking to it, and I don't care who judges me. Speaking of the quarterback position, what in the world is going on with Joey Aguilar, Mr. Brown?
Well, let me preface all of this by saying I cover college football team. I'm not a courts reporter, or I did not go to law school. I did do a journalism law school at UT, but I did during the summer. So it was a much abbreviated version of the one that a lot of people probably took during the fall and the spring. But Ben, I think he has seen what has happened with Charles Bediako down in Tuscaloosa and what is happening with Trinidad Chambliss over in Oxford and said, hey, I'm going to do the same thing. Obviously, all of those 3 cases are very different in terms of what NCAA rules are being challenged and what is being sought. But it is a copycat move to pivot from being part of the Diego Pavia lawsuit in federal court, which has a hearing in Nashville next week, and going about it alone and suing the NCAA on your own in Knox County Court. It's the Chancery Court here in Knoxville. So going local is the move that Joey Aguilar and his representation, Cameron North, who actually argued on Tennessee's behalf 2 years ago in federal court, again, for the state of Tennessee, which was acting on the university's behalf, trying to keep the NCAA away from investigating the Nico Iamaleava NIL recruiting stuff. So I'm kind of gotten flashbacks to 2 years ago and going to a federal courthouse in Greenville, Tennessee to cover that case. But yeah, Joey Aguilar has gone from waiting on seeing what happens with the Pavia case to going about it on his own. He's been they filed the lawsuit, I believe it was Friday of last week. Pretty much the same argument, right? The NCAA counts junior college seasons toward its eligibility. The Pavia case and Aguilar's lawsuit both argue that why should my years at a non-NCAA school count towards my NCAA eligibility? This is Aguilar's. Yeah, he'll, if he gets cleared, he'll be a quote 8th year senior in 2026. But this is only his 4th year of football at this level, so it's a unique case. But the argument is the same. It's just the location is different. The case is moving pretty quickly. He's already been granted a temporary restraining order by a Knoxville judge, which basically means he can act like he's eligible for the next 15 days from Wednesday. And then there will be a preliminary injunction hearing. I believe it's next Friday, the 13th. There was some talk that it might be the 6th. I think there's some crossover there with his hearing, Bediako's hearing down in Alabama. I believe Trinidad Chambliss has a hearing next week in some tiny courthouse in Mississippi. So the move is going local, and that's what's been different. Aguilar is argued that he needs an answer quickly because he needs to know if he needs to start getting ready for spring ball at Tennessee or for the NFL. And so his lawsuit has revealed that he will be back here, which I don't think was any big surprise, especially after he didn't go into the portal at the end of the window. I think that was an option that maybe he could have tried. He could have thrown his name in the portal to keep his options open, but I think his plan all along, not that he was willing to say it back in November and December when he was asked about it repeatedly, was to either play in the NFL in 2026 or play at Tennessee. So it looks like this case is, I wrote this week that, never assume anything with the courts, right? I mean, Tennessee has had athletes try to sue for extra years, or, be it Sakai Ziegler or Alberto Osuna. And those cases did not work out, but this one seems pretty, I don't say straightforward, but it seems like there's a very high chance that it succeeds, just based on what the NCAA did last year with the Pavia case and giving a blanket waiver. And the judge in his TRO ruling this week even said, the NCAA didn't have any issues, waiving its JUCO rule last year. Why would it, why would things change now? So I think it's pretty good chance he gets the injunction. I think he needs the injunction to extend the timeline beyond just a couple of weeks. I do believe that if he does win it, that the NCAA will appeal. What else do they have to lose? They don't really have any other ways to go about governing eligibility except through the courts when these lawsuits pop up, and there's a lot of them. So I think this is it's a copycat move. I don't know that a few weeks ago, if the Bediako stuff pops up, that goes about this way. Maybe Aguilar just stays on the Pavia case and waits that out. But seeing how that move worked for in one case in one state, hey, let's try that. Maybe get something quicker. Maybe get increase your chances of a favorable ruling, and that appears where things where things appear to be with Aguilar at this point.
How much are you reading into his open roster spot that was revealed? How much NIL money is set aside? I don't think it's a surprise that Tennessee wants Joey back, but I guess what I'm asking is, how much are you reading into how much they actually do want him back, if that makes sense?
Well, it's not a surprise. I would think, if Tennessee could have had him back from the beginning, I think that would have been their option number one, right? I think that's the continuity at the quarterback position, the chance to get him into a full off season. Now, he does have the arm injury, so I think even if he does get cleared and is eligible for spring practice, I don't know how much he'll be involved in spring practice, but the guy with the tumor in his arm that he didn't tell anybody about till after the season and had surgery to remove, with having to sort of fast track, learn the offense after getting here in mid-May amid unique circumstances, goes out and leads the SEC in passing. So, something they were talking about, I can't remember which broadcast it was or which game it was late in the season, but Josh Heupel's never had the same starting quarterback from one season opener to the next in 5 years. Now, I guess the most continuity of the position was from 21 to 22, and Hendon Hooker took over third game of that 21 season and came back in 2022. And look what happened. Look what happened that season. That offense was outstanding. They won 11 games, would have made the 12-team playoff, and potentially been a tough out in that format, given what they had that season. And then they've had a different starting quarterback every year since then. Now, again, they had, Joe Milton was in his third year in the program, all that stuff, but you have a chance for continuity at the most important position. So I thought, if Tennessee could have signed up for another year of Joey Aguilar going back to November, October, that's what they would have signed up for, in my opinion. And I think Josh Heupel has even attached, gone on the record saying we want him back. I do think they were sort of waiting and keeping that option open. Maybe that sort of gave them, maybe it may have made them more selective in the portal in January when they were going after just a couple of guys, and they were waiting to see what Aguilar was going to do. They were waiting to see what Ty Simpson was going to do. And to your point about the NIL compensation, the lawsuit that Aguilar filed points out that he never made any money early on, for much of his college football career, made over $1 million this past year at Tennessee and would make approximately $2 million, I believe is what the exact words this year, which when you consider what Brendan Sorsby got at Texas Tech, what I'm sure Miami was giving Darian Mensah, and what LSU probably needed to pay to get Sam Levitt, getting Joey Aguilar at $2 million is a pretty good deal if you're Tennessee. So I think it was weird to me that Aguilar was always so, I don't know, I don't know if I want to come back here. I don't know what my plans are, when I don't know why either side wouldn't have signed up for another year together, right? And to Aguilar's point, I know there's some fans that are kind of, I'll be happy Joey's back, but I don't like this for college sports. Look at it from Joey's standpoint. He's not going to make $2 million if he goes to the NFL next year. Almost certainly. It'd be a long shot. So why not challenge for an extra year, maximize your earning potential, especially if you think you have a good case, which I think he does. So, that's why it was always odd to me that he was never like, yeah, I want to come back and play next season, when that, that would seem to be obvious to anyone that watched him play and heard what Josh Heupel said about him throughout the season and all those things.
What do you think this means for George McIntyre and Faison Brandon? And I don't mean to get too far ahead. Maybe I am making a mistake by being optimistic on Joey's behalf, but it seems like this week has just been a really positive development for Tennessee and Josh Heupel and Joey Aguilar. Maybe I proved to read into that incorrectly, but if things do turn out the way that Tennessee and Aguilar hopes it does, what do you think this means for the two young guys who have a lot of promise, obviously, but may be a year away? On the other hand, what do you think it means for George McIntyre and Faison Brandon?
Well, I'm kind of with you, Ben. I caution to say don't assume anything with the courts and judges, and I think some people were maybe assuming that they knew what would happen at various points of this without, I've always kind of been like, who knows what a judge might do? It's the same judge gave Diego Pavia an injunction a year ago, but there was another case that he just ruled on in mid-January where he ruled in favor of the NCAA. So, and again, Ziegler and Osuna had differing cases of that, felt like could be pretty good, and neither of them were successful. So, but this one feels kind of like I don't want to say a slam dunk, but it seems like it's gone from long shot to a very, very real possibility that Joey Aguilar is Tennessee's quarterback in 2026. That's going to be my expectation. I'd be surprised if he didn't get the injunction, given that the NCAA had no issue not enforcing those rules a year ago. So why, what court is going to be like, well, you yourselves were okay without these rules. Why do you want to enforce them now? The NCAA is not, I don't think their record in court is very good. So at this point, I would be surprised if it doesn't turn out successful for Joey Aguilar. I do think I think probably the biggest loser is probably George McIntyre, right? I mean, he's been operating the last several weeks now thinking, hey, I've got a great chance to be the starting quarterback, to now you're probably looking at being the backup next season. Again, there's no spring window, so Tennessee doesn't have to worry about losing him until next January or next December at the earliest, in which case Aguilar would be out of eligibility, and you could say, hey, you can go compete for the job for 27. I do think McIntyre has, his advantage over Faison Brandon is never going to be as big as it was when Faison's just getting here. So I think that goes out the window. But I think for Tennessee in the big picture, I think getting Aguilar back gives them much more credibility. I think they'll be taken more seriously on a SEC, regional, and a national scale, because their biggest offseason question mark was going to be, who's the quarterback? What do you get out of that position? Are these young guys ready? Can they play up to their talent quickly? And now you're taking that situation out of the equation. You're plugging in a guy that threw for over 3,500 yards, 24 touchdowns. Yeah, Joey had some turnover issues and threw 10 interceptions and had some key mistakes and a couple of Tennessee's losses. But you got to remember the context of that team and just how different it's going to be going into this season, because instead of plugging him in on late notice into a largely new offense at the time, you're now going to be bringing him back into an offense for a full offseason that's also going to have, 8 starters back. You've got 5 starting offensive linemen that played a lot of football for you last year. You've got all SEC running back in Deshaun Bishop. You've got 2 of your top 3 receivers. Braylon Sedley was the SEC Freshman of the Year. You've got Mike Matthews coming back. And even the new guys that you're going to be plugging into some of those positions, right? I mean, Ethan Davis showed some good things toward the end of the season. What kind of offseason does Hassan Brame have? Obviously a very talented player, a good, potential pass catching weapon there at tight end. And that other receiver spot's going to have some former blue chip guy there, whether it's Rodarius Jackson, Travis Smith, Tristan Keys, whoever it is. So you plug him back into that lineup, and maybe you were excited about plugging a young talent like George or Faison into that lineup, but now you've got a more proven commodity going into that lineup. Plus you kind of look at what you've done on defense, and it's hard not to get excited about what, I think Tennessee's floor is certainly raised. Is their ceiling raised? I don't know. That's a tough question to answer, just because we don't know how good George McIntyre or Faison are going to be, or they may be better in 27 and 28 than they would be in 26. Right. So I think if you're a Tennessee fan and I saw a lot of, well, why can't we do what Indiana's done? Indiana just won a national title with an old team. Why would you not want your 25-year-old starting quarterback back, right? I mean, I think that seems pretty straightforward. Even if you don't necessarily like that guys are playing 6, 7, 8 years now. I mean, this isn't a situation where he's coming back from a professional league like Bediako is. He's not trying to fudge a medical red shirt from 4 years ago like Trinidad Chambliss is, trying to claim something that there was a medical situation and do that. This is a pretty straightforward, okay, I played at a non-NCAA school. Why should that count and hinder my earning potential at an NCAA school when I'm at my value is arguably at its highest point? So I do think McIntyre is probably a loser, but again, I mean, Aguilar might not be heavily involved in spring ball, so it's a great chance for George and Faison to develop then. And you never know. I mean, Aguilar could go out, he could come back and be the starter, and everybody's excited going into the season, and he gets started the opening series, and George is the guy. You never know. But I do think those young quarterbacks are probably feeling a lot like some of those young linebackers did when Arion Carter kind of reversed course there right at the end of the window. Just, you go from thinking one thing is going to happen to, a guy coming back and maybe blocking your path to the field, but you got to keep working, and I'm sure that'll be the case for George. We hear backup quarterbacks say all the time, right, that we're going to prepare, we prepare like we're the starter. That shouldn't change anything on that level. I'm sure on some human level that it probably sucks, but I think a lot of guys will be excited that Joey's back, and certainly what he did won him a lot of favor in that locker room, and it certainly will boost Tennessee's profile, I think, on a national level, and certainly improve their outlook. Because, like I said, you take what else they have around him, and I said this on one of our podcasts back in January about the meandering quarterback situation. It was like, you've got a really good offense coming back, a lot of players back. You've done a good job of upgrading and addressing and fixing your issues on defense through the portal, through staff changes. Why aren't you going and locking down the quarterback spot? Well, this may kind of fall into their laps, and now your biggest offseason question is, what if Joey's back? What's the next big concern for Tennessee? So I think that's why this is certainly a big deal if it turns out in Tennessee's favor.
I wonder if there should be a quarterback competition. I mean, that's something that Jason Swain and I touched on Thursday morning's Swain event. Is do you do it to try and keep George and Faison happy because they thought that they were going to have a quarterback competition?
You're going to play it up that way, surely.
Yeah, surely, for sure. You're going to package it the right way. And Swain made the great point of, because of McIntyre's ties to Nashville and Brentwood Academy and how important and good Nashville recruiting has become to Tennessee, like you got to make sure that you keep those relationships in a healthy spot, even if it doesn't work out for McIntyre at Tennessee. But also, like, I don't think it's an outlandish thought to wonder if, like, could George be better than Joey this year? Would I bet on that? No, but I do I think it's in the realm of possibility that it clicks for George and he adds the weight necessary. Then, like, yeah, he could end up being the best option at quarterback for Tennessee. But what's also difficult, as you mentioned, Joey's not going to be going through spring practice because of the surgery on the benign tumor. So, I mean, if there was a competition opened up, then you really wouldn't see that until fall practice rolled around. But it'll be interesting. Of course, we'll continue to have plenty of updates on the latest with Joey Aguilar's situation over the next week or so. And before we know it, spring practice will be kicking off.
Yeah, March 16th. It's after UT's spring break. They're not going to do what they did last year and have, a week or two and then break. They're going to do it all after spring break, 4 weeks in a row, leading up to the Orange and White game that was announced this week. It'll be April 11th at Neyland Stadium. Time still TBD. I would probably not assume that it will be streamed anywhere. The SEC doesn't require that to be the case anymore. I mean, there's a handful of teams that probably won't even have a spring game. I guess with no portal window, maybe you don't have to worry about guys going out and playing well and getting poached, or going out and having a good spring game or spring and coming to your office saying, hey, I want more money, or I'm going to the portal. You don't have to worry about that anymore. But I'm sure it'll still be treated, let's not get anybody hurt, anybody that's iffy. We're not going to play, that kind of thing. So, but it'll be free. That'll be a change from last year where I think it was $10. So And to your point about George, just about the spring, I mean, if he goes out there and just looks phenomenal during spring ball, like and kind of maybe like he did, for parts of fall camp last year, if he goes out there and Tennessee's coaches are like, holy crap, this guy is really good, then I think a competition in that realm becomes something that you have to look really hard at. But I mean, are you going to go through all this trouble? I don't know that Tennessee's how much they're directing this, but certainly there's some involvement that their quarterback is sort of gone from just being part of one lawsuit to doing everything on his own in town. You have Josh Heupel filing a court document saying, hey, we want him back. I mean, are you going to go through all that just to have this guy potentially beat out by a redshirt freshman with 9 career passes? I don't know. Seems kind of, that would be head scratching on its surface. But again, if George goes out there, or shoot, even Faison, I'm really big on Faison. I think he's ultra talented. And maybe this is a better situation for him if Joey does come back, as he's got a year to sort of marinate in the system and then can go after it in 27. But yeah, I mean, if George goes out there and looks great, and he kind of did in preseason camp last year, then that could make Tennessee think twice about just plugging Joey right back in. But it kind of goes. It's kind of interesting. Like I said, I mean, Tennessee was going from a kind of really puzzling, and I know we talked about this on a podcast, Ben, just how it was like, what are they doing? It's kind of all over the place. You go from aiming at two very high profile guys that were going to cost a lot of money and have a lot of competition. You kind of pass on Bo Pribula, and you end up with a backup from Colorado and Ryan Staub, and then this situation might fall right into your lap. So, I mean, it might work out for him, but we'll just have to see if it plays out that way, and how that changes the response for those young quarterbacks. Does their edge leave a little bit? Does it not? Does it increase the edge for those guys, knowing that, hey, I still want to prove that I can be the guy. We'll just have to see how it plays out. But I would say certainly it seems a lot more likely that Joey Aguilar will be Tennessee's quarterback in 2026 than it was the last time we were on this podcast talking about it.
Well, and Joey deserves to be labeled as a starting quarterback based off of what he did last year. It's just such a unique situation with workouts already being underway. I know Joey received the temporary restraining order, which allows him to act as if he is part of the team until a ruling comes down. But like, workouts are underway, and I'm sure meetings are underway, and it's just a weird situation all the way around, because Joey is applying for an extra year that people typically do not get. And you have 2 ultra talented young guys who might be ready, but probably won't be ready because of their age and youthfulness. And then you also don't want to run either of them off at the same time. You don't want to piss either one of them off, even if there's not a spring window. It's just a really odd situation. So I'll be curious to see if they do open it up and have a legitimate competition. But it'll be odd, because it's no slight against me having that thought. Has nothing to do with Joey or against Joey, because like I said, I think Joey deserves to be labeled the starter. It's just such a unique situation with the other 2 young guys involved.
Yeah, and it's kind of, Tennessee's kind of caught itself in this situation by sort of being in between the bring in a transfer versus go the high school quarterback route, right? Like, and you could make the case that the Tennessee's offenses have been their best with older guys, right, running the show, with Hendon Hooker, with Joey Aguilar, maybe less of an extent Joe Milton. But even all 3, all the seasons that those quarterbacks led, I think the offense was better than what it was with Nico as a redshirt freshman starting. So you can make that case, but you can also make the case of, if you're going to invest so much in these young quarterbacks, at some point you've got to say, you're our guy. And again, there were a lot of transfer quarterbacks that were leading playoff teams, right? Was it the Final 4 teams all had transfer guys? There's some teams that have gone young and it's worked out. So maybe not to that extent, but you've been able to put, some teams have plugged in young guys and it's worked. So, and to your point about it being odd, I mean, a week ago, Tennessee was like, okay, we're rolling with the young guys. That seemed to be the plan, and now it's pivoted. It does seem a little, again, meandering is the word I've kind of written a few times, and it still is, I guess, meandering, because 1 week it's all about George and is he going to gain weight and all this stuff, and now it's like, oh, Joey's going to be back. Oh well. we'll see how it plays out.
We will indeed see how it plays out. And again, encourage you to stay locked into GoVols247.com, as we will certainly have plenty of updates over the coming weeks and takeaways as well with whatever plays out. Patrick, thank you for your time today, my friend.
Appreciate you, Ben. Enjoy the rest of the segment with a much more esteemed guest than me.
I do love me some John Wilkerson. I do. But I also love me some Patrick Brown. This could not be a better podcast for me personally. The only way it could be better is if Ryan Callahan was here. So we'll make that happen on the next podcast. But as I mentioned, as Patrick just alluded to, John Wilkerson is going to join us on the other side of this quick timeout here on the GoVols247 Podcast. Welcome back into the GoVols247 Podcast. I am Ben McKee, and I'm now joined by one of my favorite people on the entire planet. And I'm not just saying that because he's kind of sitting in front of me, at least through the computer. He is truly one of a kind and the absolute best. You will never hear a bad word about the great John Wilkerson, a man of many talents, a man who has been juggling several responsibilities the last several months. But, of course, most know John as the voice, the great voice of Tennessee baseball. John, certainly appreciate you joining us and giving us some of your time on an off week for you of all weeks, of course.
Ben, I really appreciate it, and always enjoy being able to cross paths with you, and very much appreciate the invitation.
Yes, absolutely. You are welcome anytime. You can supplant me if you'd like on here. You just let me know, and we'll make that happen. I have several topics that I want to cover with you today. We're mostly going to talk Tennessee basketball, but Patrick and myself just wrapped up a conversation about everything going on with Tennessee's quarterback position, and Joey Aguilar. Looks like things are trending in the right direction for him to potentially have another year with Tennessee. What are your thoughts on the madness that is the Joey Aguilar situation, as it seems like we're going to get a conclusion here this month?
Yeah, and that's what you hope for, is just to know what's next, and for this to be kind of up in the air, as well as the different path. I can appreciate somebody who changes their strategy and with what they think is going to be the best opportunity for them to get that chance to keep playing. It is interesting that we see now that the best path to getting a temporary restraining order or an injunction is through your local courts, state and even county for that matter. And so I know that there's been so much talk about the basketball side of things with Bediako in Alabama, but this is still somebody who has never played 1 second of pro ball, has never been drafted. And while he has spent 7 seasons on a roster or another, I can appreciate where he stands in regards to, he played 2 years of junior college, played 2 years of college football at Appalachian State, and then another at the high major level in the Power Four with Tennessee. So I think that there's a pretty good chance, but I also think that the NCAA is going to continue to fight this, because they just feel that at some point in time, it's got to your eligibility comes to an end. So I do think that we might know what his path is, but I also wouldn't be surprised if the NCAA, they were still fighting against Pavia being able to play this past season into the season. And so there was the final claim by the NCAA that got rejected when we got into September. And so I do think the NCAA is going to continue to try and sink its teeth into it. But for Tennessee, without question, they would love to get another year of such an experienced quarterback. Also, to look at where he was. And, it was something to hear that at the tail end of his season, all that was going on with his shoulder, and that's why he wasn't the crisp, clean quarterback that we got to see the start of the season. So it would be great to see if indeed Joey gets to come back and Aguilar can be healthy from start to finish, because that really was a big difference in some of those big games where for Tennessee it was make or break as to whether or not they would go get a real good shot at another spot in the playoff field. In the end, obviously, the defense might have been the bigger question as to whether Tennessee was good enough to be a college football playoff team. But for Aguilar, I appreciate how hard he played, obviously what he played through, and it would be awesome to see him get to wear the orange and white one more year.
If he does get to wear it one more year, what does that change in your mind in terms of the outlook of the 2026 Vols? Because I think you obviously start with, okay, it certainly raises their ceiling, but because of the inexperience of George McIntyre and Faison Brandon, I know Ryan Staub's coming in from Colorado, but I think we would all be surprised if he won the job over the two young guys. It raises the floor, I think, is the more important thing with Aguilar coming back for another season in terms of the overall potential success of the team in 2026.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I would simply point to what we have seen as kind of the default projection for Tennessee's starter is George McIntyre. Doesn't mean that George wouldn't be outstanding in terms of Tennessee's quarterback. Saw him play in high school, and while he is somebody who needs to build on that frame, he's got a good frame, he's got a good head on his shoulders, and so you know that he's somebody who would be adequate for Tennessee just from the get-go. But to compete in the Southeastern Conference, you have to be excellent, and Aguilar has shown that. And just to see the preseason way too early projections as to here's how we stack the quarterbacks 1 through 16, that McIntyre's been kind of Tennessee's fill in the blank quarterback for now. And so he shows up when ESPN did it 15th in one survey and 16th in the other. And Aguilar puts you into the top half. And I do think that's where Tennessee would be, because we've seen some of those early projections for the Vols, maybe 10th or 11th, maybe even 12th in some projections, 1 to 16 in terms of how teams would be forecast in the Southeastern Conference. But I do think a veteran quarterback with what you return on offense, like a Deshaun Bishop, things along those lines, I just think that Tennessee would immediately go with perhaps what might be a better defense, better personnel throughout front line to the back end of the defense. I think Tennessee goes into the top half of the SEC, which means you are competing for a spot in the college football playoff.
I completely agree with you. On the basketball front, you've had quite the experience this year throughout basketball season. You're obviously longtime friends with Mike Keith, but getting to call basketball games with him as he transitions to the voice of Tennessee football and Tennessee basketball, also working with Chris Lofton as well. My favorite basketball player of all time. He is who I emulated outside on my basketball hoop when I was in middle school. So what has that experience been like for you this season? Not only just calling basketball games, which I believe is something a bit new to you or something that you had not at least done in a while. What has that experience been like in addition to working with Mike and Chris, two also of the best people in the world?
Yeah, last time that I worked with Mike Keith, it was like the '98 baseball season, and he was about to accept. In fact, he was standing in the stairwell at Lindsey Nelson Stadium that no longer exists. That stairwell up to the press box when he accepted the job to become the voice of the Tennessee Titans. And so that was the last year that we worked together on the air. And so it's been a pleasure. While we have certainly kept tabs throughout the years, and he joined us on the regular on Sports Talk, it is something to sit next to him and call a game with him, which was really very, very, it was just a whole lot of fun. Didn't take long for some of those feelings from the road trips back with Rod Delmonico leading the way to Athens and other places where that magic came back in a hurry in terms of just the different things that we talked about. But to call games with him, a distinct pleasure. And it was different because when I had done basketball for the last several years, it had always been pinch hitting for Bob and filling in with those pre-conference tournaments, those holiday tournaments, things like that. So to go from doing that, which I really love doing out in Vegas again this year with Steve Hamer, but then to slide over and be an analyst, that was where was perhaps the biggest adjustment, because again, I hadn't sat in that seat with Mike in probably 30 years. So to get a feel for this team, which I really like, and there's such a good group of guys to be around, not a surprise at all that that's the case, but just to see some early success out in Las Vegas, and then to play through a rough patch as they entered into conference play, I just think that it's been something to watch them come around, and they're an easy team to pull for, and I like where they are. I like the pieces in place, and I think they're set up for a really solid second half. Hard to believe because it seems like they've been playing basketball forever, but we are now, with this trip to Lexington coming up, it's going to be the first game of the second half of the SEC schedule. And I think we saw with the victory over the Texas A&M by Alabama, this is a conference that's up for grabs. And while Tennessee would love to get back those opportunities that it missed out on with how the games went in Fayetteville and Gainesville, I think this is a team that, one, would love nothing more than to mark back against Kentucky at their place starting this weekend and really get everything shored up for the push to the SEC tournament and to March.
What has impressed you most about this Tennessee basketball team on their 4-game winning streak, winning, I believe, 5 out of the last 6? I guess the easy answer is Nate Ament, of course. But maybe aside from Nate, of course, you can speak on Nate if you would like. But what has impressed you most with Tennessee's turnaround here the last couple of weeks?
I like what we've seen. I'll go with JP Estrella to start because when Tennessee lost the way it did, where Arkansas essentially just separated over those final 8-9 minutes in Fayetteville, and then for Florida just take over the game with that late push over the final 5 minutes, essentially of the first half, and just walked away from him in the second half. I thought JP was struggling just a little bit to find his footing. And it's not a surprise because he had essentially zero SEC experience. You know, he got to play some as a freshman, but all the time that he missed last year. But to see him move into the starting lineup and do what he's done, I just really like his presence. I like what he brings to the team. And I just like his makeup as a ball player. And then I would also add Bishop Boswell to the mix because you continue to see him grow. I thought it was really significant that we saw in this last game for Tennessee to get the win as it did against Ole Miss, that you normally see Coach Barnes give Jacoby Gillespie a breather right before immediate timeout. So you take him out with like 13 minutes or 12:48 to go on the clock if there is a stoppage in play, and then you get the media timeout and he goes back in. Well, thought they were setting that up exactly for the 12-minute media timeout, but they didn't. He left him on the bench. And as he had talked about, you know, after the game and the win against Georgia, or I should say Auburn, that he had made a point to practice without Jacoby out there just so, one, benefits Jacoby, giving him a little bit of a breather, but also the guys to know that, hey, it could be the drop of a hat that you wind up having to play without him. But I love the fact that it was by coach's decision and not any reflection on his play, because he was a big part of Tennessee getting off to the start that it did against the Rebels. I just love the fact that you went after the media timeout without Gillespie in. And so I think that you have a pretty set rotation. You know what your roles are, and you look at the ability to go out and execute. Tennessee puts together great scout after great scout, but I think what the difference is the team's doing a great job of executing that game plan, of going out there and meeting the marks, where it's like, here's what we have to do on defense, here's what we need to do around the rim. They still need to be better when it comes to finishing at the basket on offense, so that's still job one, as well as being consistent at the free throw line. But I really like where this team is. And then winding around to Nate Ament. Love the fact that he could have 2 points at the half, 1 of 5 from the field, has 3 rebounds, 2 fouls, 2 turnovers, and an assist. I just love the fact that it doesn't bother him because he knows that the next shot, if it goes, it goes. But I appreciate his mindset and just the fact that he seems rather unflappable. Doesn't look like it bothers him in terms of getting him frustrated when things aren't going well. But I really love how he's accepted the role of leadership, as well as how hard he's playing, how hard he works from one game to the next, the stuff that the people don't see, and then also how comfortable he is, whether he's facilitating with dishing the ball and being able to pass the way he does, or just take over on offense as he did when Tennessee really put their foot on the gas against Ole Miss.
I think this could end up being a Tennessee team that we look back on and talk about it being one of Rick Barnes and his coaching staff's best coaching jobs. And I recognize that there's a lot of talent, and that makes life easier on you as a coach. But just with how many newcomers, with how much Nate Ament has grown, I mean, that is a phenomenal job. You, of course, give a lot of credit to Nate. He's so mature. He puts in a ton of work. An easy young man to root for because of how he approaches things and how mature he is. That's why Rick Barnes raves about him every time he talks about him in interviews. But Rick has still done an excellent job of bringing Nate along throughout the course of the season. Of course, we've seen the growth and jump from December to where we are now. But just with all the new pieces, having to play more freshmen in addition to Nate than you expected, and then the jump that Nate is making, the jump that Jacoby is making as a true point guard. I mean, I really like where this team is going. And not to brag on myself, but in my group chats with my buddies when things weren't going well in December and early January, I was like, yes, it's very frustrating right now. There's things that they need to get ironed out for sure, quick, fast, and in a hurry. But let's see where they end up in February. Let's see where they're at in March, especially with Nate. And I think you're seeing why, because they've always had the pieces. It was just about those pieces growing together. And I think this coaching staff is doing an excellent job of molding them together at this point in time.
Yeah, I very much agree. I think you're spot on. And, and it would be great to get Felix Okpara back. Hope he can get healthy and put that calf injury behind him. And I really wish that, because I think you see flashes where Coach Barnes made Jalen Carey such a priority. That he's got the muscle and the physicality that you want under the boards, but he's I agree with Coach. You can just see that he's still kind of scratching the surface on what he brings on one possession after the next. And so I think that he is somebody that's a wild card. And as you mentioned, this is a freshman class that's got some seasoning to it. And the other night you're playing 4 freshmen on the floor at the same time. And that is obviously where you are. But I just really like the way that Dwayne Brown plays basketball. And he is somebody who is very confident in his shot. He's not anybody that's going to perhaps draw you out beyond the arc to stretch the defense. But boy, he's really good at just seeing where there's maybe a foot in the door, a path to the basket. And I think he's somebody who is really just dead set on grabbing the basketball if it's up for grabs. So I do think this is a team that continues to get seasoned, and I think they're going to be a lot of fun to watch. I think this is one where the sky's the limit.
I do as well, and it'll be fun to watch them continue to grow throughout the month of February. When you look at Saturday's game against Kentucky, the rematch inside Rupp Arena, Tennessee, the players and coaches are going to talk about. They're already talking about it because I asked I asked Nate Ament and JP Estrella about what needs to be different this time around. And they talked about toughness, and they just did not keep their foot on the gas for 40 minutes in the first matchup. Rick Barnes talked about the same thing when he was asked by somebody else, saying that if we're not going to play for 40 minutes, then we might as well not even drive up there. So that is their talking point, and it is a great talking point because that's exactly what happened. Kentucky was the tougher team. Tennessee did not keep its foot on the pedal for all 40 minutes. It got too comfortable there at halftime with the big lead. I believe it was 16 points at one point. So when you look at this matchup on Saturday, what are some things that you feel Tennessee needs to make sure they do a better job of to make sure that they can get some revenge on their rival, in addition to being tougher and just making sure that they're given the requisite amount of effort for 40 minutes?
This would be one of those matchups where I feel that you almost have to have Felix Okpara back in the lineup just for what he means. I think Kentucky, while very youthful in spots, especially when it comes to the post, I just think, once again, you see talent very similar to Tennessee. You've got youth, you've got newcomers. It's been a process for this roster to come together, and they've even been dealt a couple of blows with guys that they've lost, not just for a stretch, but for the season. So Mark Pope, for whatever reason, just seems to have Tennessee's number when it comes to the regular season. Tennessee, of course, got the game it had to have when the Sweet 16 last year, and in March Madness, their first and only NCAA tournament meeting. That was outstanding, but it just seems like there's a recipe where they are going to get the baskets underneath, get the baskets in close when they need them. And boy, I think they as a team probably have the most success on the perimeter, seemingly against the Vols, more so than any other. Now, Florida obviously had a very good game shooting the three, which they weren't supposed to have because they were dead last when Tennessee went to Gainesville earlier this year. But it just seems like Kentucky always has somebody that drains it from three to either, one, overcome a deficit or start to build an advantage. And I think for the Vols, it's going to be paramount that you're playing at their place. They're going to be very confident. Heck, they were saying after the win and the fact they didn't have the lead until the last minute when they were in Knoxville, it's like, yeah, me and the guys love playing in Knoxville. So they expected to win, and Tennessee has to go up there knowing that this is a group of Wildcats that is thinking about nothing but a W. And they've been, again, impressive for the fact that at times they've looked completely out of sorts. But they seem to have really found themselves, and they're going to be right there in the mix for an SEC championship in terms of the regular season moving forward. So I think for the Vols, you always want to get off to a fast start in the road, but I think you need to be sharp, crisp, especially defensively. Make sure you defend all shots beyond the arc. Don't give them the open looks where they seem to just drain one after the other. But know that it is, without question, and it is the cliche to say it, it is going to take 40 minutes of basketball. But Coach Barnes knows how to coach a team to a win in Rupp, and I do believe that Tennessee will take this one down to the wire. I'll be surprised if they don't.
Yeah, and there's plenty of reasons to make sure you are locked in and ready to go in this game. It's Kentucky. If you're a Tennessee basketball player, that speaks for itself. B, it's in Rupp. C, what happened in Knoxville a couple of weeks ago. But also an element that I look at is that Mark Pope has had Tennessee's number a bit, at least in the regular season. Now, if you're Tennessee, of course, you trade that for the win in the Sweet 16 last year. But outside of that, I mean, he's won 3 out of 4 matchups so far. So he's been a thorn in the side of Rick Barnes these last 2 years outside of that Sweet 16 game. So plenty of motivation, and I would be surprised if they're not more intense consistently throughout the game, is I guess the way that I would put it. But I think if you're Tennessee, it was a good thing that Felix Okpara did not play on Tuesday night. I know the team itself does not view it through this prism, John, but Felix did not need to play against Ole Miss. Tennessee was going to be able to get by without him because of what you have in JP and Carey and Dwayne Brown. So to me, I think it was a good thing that they didn't force the issue there. Not that they would, but he got a little more rest there before this weekend's game at Kentucky. Because like you said, I do think he's going to be a key piece, assuming he can go.
Yeah, and with Pope, you know, he never lost to Tennessee when he was on the roster, and that includes a transfer year back when you had to sit out for a season, as he did, moving from Washington to the Southeastern Conference. So he never experienced a loss against Tennessee when he was a player at Kentucky, and until March had not lost to Tennessee as a coach. And it's interesting how many times in that short handful of games that Tennessee's been the favorite, and they've just, again, Kentucky's found a way to win because you had one guy that got really hot or was able to take over the game and just not miss. So this is big for Tennessee, because when you lose a home game as they did to the Wildcats and you have that opportunity to mark back, this is where you right the ship, and this is where you perhaps just add to, as you've talked about already, what is a 4-game win streak. The team is so confident in its abilities, and I do think that this time, I just hope they have an answer for Aberdeen, because he drove me nuts in that second half. His ability just to drive to the basket when given the opportunity, or beat you from 3. He was the wild card. He was the guy that simply took over the game for Kentucky and refused to let his teammates lose. He did that on the road, and Tennessee needs that not on my watch guy. And it could be Jacoby Gillespie. I would love for Jacoby to have a huge game, especially down the last 5 minutes of the game, because that's where he missed an opportunity at the free throw line. That's where you had a couple of really costly turnovers. And when Tennessee fell behind, it was just a pass that shouldn't have been made the way it was made, that allowed them to get the breakout, the run out, and do what they did. So I would love to see Jacoby be the guy that comes through down the stretch to help Tennessee get a win at Rupp Arena.
Do want to ask you 2 quick baseball questions before we get you out of here.
Sure.
On the Diamond Vols podcast, myself and Will Heflin were speaking yesterday about how last year in college baseball, we had 2 fascinating examples of first-year head coaches. You had the disaster at Texas A&M with Michael Early, but then you had the tremendous success story of Coastal Carolina and Kevin Schnall taking over for a legend there at Coastal Carolina. What gives you confidence that Josh Elander, having been around him during his time at Tennessee, that he's going to be able to handle the pressures of not only being a first-year head coach, but also taking over for that lunatic that departed for the Giants in the dugout?
Well, I love the fact that he was here for every single step of the journey, from the time that, I mean, it wasn't long after Coach put on the orange blazer for the first time, Tony Vitello, that he became a part of the program. And so you could actually argue that he's been on the field for more victories at Tennessee than Coach, because Josh has never been suspended. He's never had to sit out a game. He's never had to open a lemonade stand. So I think that you could make that argument. Obviously, I say that in jest, But again, this is somebody who's been a part of everything from the jump. He's been a part of the roster construction. He knows exactly what the thought process, and I'm sure as well as he knows the game, he's been thinking and knowing that this was going to be an opportunity that came his way. And if it wasn't as the head coach in Knoxville, it was as the head coach where he was going to be tabbed as the new guy at another probably SEC school, because he's had opportunities, but this has been his place. This is what's become home. And so I love the fact that he is the strongest bit of continuity from start to finish with this era of unmatched success for Big Orange baseball. So I love the fact that you've got guys that have been a part of it that are now even more so an increased role, like Ross Kivett after he made his return to the staff. The fact that Josh Reynolds was already a part of this coaching staff last year, got to know Tennessee's players, the approach, working with Frank Anderson the way he did. And also, if you're going to add to the mix, I think Chuck Geralaman is a really outstanding addition just for his length of service when it comes to being a player in the Southeastern Conference, as he was at Auburn, to what he was experiencing and part of the success in Gainesville, as he was a part of Sully's staff down there. So I like the makeup of the staff, and I really just like the makeup of Josh Elander to see, start to finish, top to bottom, what it was for the players that were supporting him to get this gig. Tells you what the impact is that he's had on them as individual players, working with them as on the offensive side of things, or just to see the great reverence that the catchers have when they get to be the position group that he leads. I just am really excited for him getting the chance to run his own program. And so the fact that he was here for every step of Tennessee's success with Tony Vitello, and now he gets to be the one that carries the banner. That's why I have such great confidence in his ability to go out there, get the job done, because he's been there to see Tennessee win, and he's been there through the construction of it all.
And then just your overall thoughts on the team. What do you feel their strengths are going to be? What are maybe some question marks you're curious to see how they play out?
As we've gotten used to with Tennessee baseball, a huge turnover from last year to this year. When you look at the leaders, the primary contributors, there are some huge names that are already looked at as the top prospect potentially at their position, whether it be a third baseman or a left-handed pitcher, with what we've seen with Fisher and Doyle. But I just think that you've got a large group of newcomers, but you also have, I think, enough from last year's team. I really am anxious to see the leadership component, because while you've got guys that played an awful lot of baseball last year for the Orange and White, they're still getting ready for their second year in the SEC. But love the fact that there are so many, whether you're talking about Clark, Lawless, guys that were a part of it last year that are comfortable enough to speak up and say, here's how we do it at Tennessee. So I think that there's a lot of versatility, which we now know that the college game is moving towards, because you saw the roster reduction to where it is a hard number you can have everybody on scholarship, but you pretty much, that's it, what the hand you're dealt. So they get to grandfather a few extra guys in. So I love the fact that you've got guys that not only can play both the infield and the outfield, but also maybe, we always knew that it was a threat with Drew Gilbert, but Drew could never take the mound and have Drew Gilbert in center field at the same time. But I am anxious to see if we will indeed actually see some guys that take a spot in the field or in the lineup that then also do some pitching, because I think the potential's there. So I'm excited to see the guys. We got to appreciate Jacoby Gillespie coming back to East Tennessee with a long desired dream to play for the Vols. And now with a young man who makes the rare move from East Tennessee State to Knoxville to play for Tennessee, a Bearden kid. I can't wait to see how he goes, and as well as Henry Ford. He looks to be the next great bat that Tennessee adds to the lineup, and the growth of guys like Jay Abernathy and Newstrom and so on. So I just think it's a good mix of guys that came to Tennessee to win, or they now get to play their biggest role ever in the Orange and White to help sustain the success, carry the banner for the Big Orange. I like the makeup of this team, but it's going to come down. I think just getting the chemistry side of it all set. I think that's job one, because you just never know if it clicks. But I do think there is enough of a presence from the guys that last year were disappointed with the super regional loss in Fayetteville to be fired up. And you've got the one imperfect game that has them top 5. And then you got Baseball America, and you've got D1 that has them in the teens. I think this is a team that is probably going to be able to put a chip on its shoulder that it might be being a little bit overlooked for a Tennessee team and program of late. So that's I'm very excited to see it all get going against Nichols starting on February 13th.
And as we're talking right now, the preseason order of finish by the coaches just came out. Tennessee picked to finish 6th, 5 teams ahead of Tennessee. LSU picked to finish 1st. Mississippi State, Arkansas, Texas also received first place votes. No first place vote for Tennessee as they are picked to finish 6th. And then Henry Ford, that big bat that you're talking about that I think will be at third base to start the year, made the preseason All-SEC first team as an outfielder. Brandon Arvidsson, first team All-SEC as a relief pitcher, and Levi Clark, second team All-SEC as a first baseman. Is there one player you've got all your chips in on? That guy for me is Blaine Brown. I think Tennessee fans are going to fall in love with Blaine Brown this season, and I think he's a guy that you're going to see not only play in the field, but also on the mound, because he's, in addition to outrageous power he has from the left side of the box, he can run it up to 96, 98 from the left side on the mound.
That's a good pick to click. He just to get a glimpse of him last year when Tennessee played in Houston and he was playing for Rice. You got to see him on the mound. You know that he's got stuff, and if you can just fine tune it, you're going to have, I think, something special. I'll go ahead and just to throw out a different name, I'm going to go Tegan Coons because he's got pitcher of the year capability. He was big for Tennessee at the start of SEC play, and then I thought it was fair that if you weren't going to get out there and perhaps work with 100% confidence, I don't think he ever lacked effort, but he took some lumps. And for him to be able, one, to stay with the program, and then go put together the summer he did in the Cape Cod League, really excited to see Tegan Coons get out there. And so there are other newcomers I can't wait to see. We've all heard about how good Cam Appenzeller is, as well as some other from another outstanding freshman class. But I'm anxious to see Tegan because I can't wait to ask him, hey, you just won Pitcher of the Week in the Southeastern Conference. Should we have them send that award to Knoxville, or should we ship it to your Gettysburg address?
Gettysburg, such a historic place to be from. A fun hometown. I think Gettysburg is, at least from growing up and learning about American history. John, we greatly appreciate your time this morning. How can people listen to you and Vince in the morning? You all have Josh Elander on once a week throughout the course of the season. Had Rocky Top Ross, a.k.a. Ross Kivett, on this morning. I believe you all are also having Amara Morgan on weekly, the Tennessee basketball assistant coach. So how can people listen to you and Vince and then also listen to your broadcast as we get into baseball season and kind of, I don't know that clunkiness is the right word, but everything going on with basketball, baseball, and softball at the same time? How can people listen to your broadcasts?
Well, when it comes to Tennessee baseball, the first step is going to be utsports.com and the Tennessee Game Day app, because that's where we will. I mean, the streaming is where just assume that you'll find it on utsports.com. And then as we get closer to the start of SEC play, when the Vols open up at Georgia, that's when we'll be working games onto the radio. The midweek games likely start with the nighttime broadcast. So it's either going to be March 10th or March 17th. When we get that first one, because when those midweek games get to an evening start, that's when we usually have a tendency to break the seal on radio. But you know, I love the fact that Sports Talk is now into its 38th year. And so it's been what I've been doing forever. And so Vince and I are on Monday mornings, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., Monday through Friday, the Sports 99.1, thesportsanimal.com. If you don't listen on the air, FM 99.1, AM 990. But it's just so exciting for Tennessee baseball to be back once again. And so this will be my 36th straight year with the Volunteers program. And I'm just so thankful that that's been the case, that I've been blessed with that opportunity. So utsports.com for sure for the early season games, and then we'll expand our reach onto radio before you know it.
Well, congratulations on a historic run. on Knoxville, on local Knoxville sports radio, and also calling Tennessee athletic games. That's a heck of an accomplishment, and very happy for you. I cherish our friendship dearly, and always appreciate being able to spend time with you.
Well, thank you so much, Ben. I can't say enough for the job that you do, and how you are just you never stop when it comes to football, basketball, baseball. You cover it all, and you do it so well. Love the approach that you have, the point of view that you share, and also just so impressed with all that you've dealt with off the field this year, and have come through like a champ. So you are right there at the top of the list among my dearest friends that I've been blessed to know, for those that I've seen cover the beat. And I just appreciate the way that you do it. So thank you very much. And anytime that we get the chance to sit down and chat, I'm all for it.
Thank you so much. That means the absolute world coming from you, and we'll make sure we get you on here again very, very soon. Need to get you on here more often, and we'll make that happen.
Well, ready when you are, but thank you so much, Ben.
For the great John Wilkerson and Patrick Brown in the first segment, I'm Ben McKee. This has been another edition of the GoVols247 Podcast.